God, they don't care. They really don't care. Oh, God. They don't care.
When you see the impact that industry is having on government, and Stephen Donnelly said something on radio last year which I thought was very interesting. He said, what happens when big business gets too close to government? Bad things happen.
Our kids will never know this countryside without an industrialisation.
Just makes me so angry.
In July 2012, it was announced that 130 new wind farms were to be built across counties Meath, Westmeath, Kildare, Laois and Offaly as part of the Greenwire project. Ireland and the UK signed a Memorandum of Understanding on energy trading. Under the agreement, Ireland would export wind energy to the UK. The wind industry claimed this agreement and the subsequent construction of wind farms would create long-term sustainable jobs and boost the national and local economy. The company Element Power signed a contract with Britain's electricity grid to supply it with renewable energy. Mainstream Renewable Power was the other company involved. Unlike wind farms in other counties, this development was to be on a much larger scale. The turbines that Mainstream Renewable Power and Element Power plan to build are to be 185 metres, and there would be approximately 2,500 of them built across the 5 counties. The wind energy companies approached farmers throughout the 5 counties in the early stages of the development proposal and offered contracts for the right to build turbines on their land. Residents living in and around the proposed sites for the turbines claim that the wind companies have not engaged them in a proper discussion about the details of the developments. Residents allege the wind companies are quoting out-of-date reports and cherry-picking irrelevant data from reports in their attempts to allay public concerns. There has been a huge groundswell in opposition to the proposed developments throughout the affected counties, with several community groups forming to get their concerns heard. People Over Wind is one of the most prominent protest groups formed in the Midlands. We caught up with our chairperson, Henry Fingleton, to discuss why the group was formed and what their concerns are.
So People Over Wind was formed when we discovered locally that a number of neighbours had signed options with private wind farm developers to host what we discovered were 600-foot high turbines in this area. And we had heard nothing about this. We didn't know anything about these plans. And some research revealed that this was quite a comprehensive plan locally, and part of a bigger plan for the Midlands. And we became very alarmed, and we ended up forming People Over Wind to I suppose, research and lobby to try and protect this area. Well, our initial concerns when we discovered what was happening was really about around the social issues related to wind farms. So there's obviously huge issues with noise, with shadow flicker, the impact on property values, the sheer damage to our landscape, our visual amenity, all those kind of issues, and they're very relevant issues. But as we evolved and as we researched more on wind farms, we became really concerned about the fact that wind farms were being generally driven by developers, very little evidence to say that they're having any meaningful impact on CO2 emissions. And that was even more alarming, because it's one thing to have to put up with a huge energy infrastructure close to your house, but it's another thing if you know that is contributing absolutely zero or very little to CO2 emissions or stopping fossil fuel imports. And that's very hard to take. So the perception among the general public is that wind power or wind energy reduces CO2 emissions. And most of the surveys will tell you that 80% of people are in favour of wind energy. And when you drive on a motorway and you see a wind farm at a distance and you think that's great, it's producing free green electricity, unfortunately the reality is very different. Wind is intermittent, so it only produces electricity about a quarter of the time. For the other 3/4, we get our electricity from mostly gas and coal plants. For the quarter of the time when the wind blows, those gas and coal plants can't be turned off. They continue to run in the background, and it's called spinning reserve. And it explains why we don't get the CO2 emissions that the industry and government tell us we get.
Tina Murphy has recently returned to live in Ireland, having spent most of her life in England. Just a few months after buying a home in the area of the Swan, County Laois, news broke that the wind turbines were to be built in the fields less than 500 metres from her front door.
My name is Tina Murphy, and I have joined the Wolf Hill, the Swan, Luggercurran Wind Aware group because I moved here back to Ireland about 18 months ago, and I moved into the Swan about May of last year. And I discovered on Facebook by accident that they intend to industrialise Ireland with wind turbines, substations and pylons. And no one, as far as I know, has had a proper consultation about this. And we certainly haven't been invited to participate in what's going on. And when I moved over from England, I wasn't completely aware of what was happening. But having looked into it, I've discovered that a lot of the turbines that are going up because they want green energy in England. And unfortunately, the English don't want the turbines over there. And they've decided it wouldn't be a bad idea to stick them up across Ireland. And one of the chaps from Element was interviewed by an English newspaper, and he said that he would find it easier to get planning permission in Ireland. So the plan is to desecrate Ireland with turbines and then send the energy across to the UK. And I was completely shocked that in England you're consulted. If they're going to do anything, there's notices put up all over the place, as well as advertised in papers. They're pinned to telegraph poles, they're pinned to trees, they're pinned to lampposts. And you get to see what's happening in your area. Over here, I have been in this house since May, and I haven't seen anybody with regard to this issue. And the only time I've met any TDs or local councillors is when I've actually gone to see them through the Windaware group. When they're going to look for votes at election time, you get nothing but information stuffed through the letterbox. When they're going to shaft you, they don't even let you know. So you wake up one day and suddenly there's a 185 metre turbine outside your door, and no one has actually told you that they're going to do that. And I just find it grossly offensive. What I find really difficult to grasp is that very, very few TDs or MEPs actually have any idea of what's going on. I'm not quite sure how you can run a country and industrialise an entire country and no one in government seems to know about what's going on. Pat Rabbitte is under the impression that you don't actually have to consult with the people. I think he actually referred to Britain as the mainland. I actually found that grossly offensive. You know, I mean, maybe he has been elected in the UK Parliament, I don't know, but he certainly doesn't have any allegiance to the Irish people as far as I can see. The claim that they're providing jobs for people, well, I mean, I don't know anyone who's actually working for the wind turbine companies. My understanding on the turbines that are going up across this country is that they're under contract, so that the turbines come in with the contractors coming in with them to put the turbines up, and then those contractors go back away again. They're not Irish people. The Irish are not being employed.
My name is Deirdre McQuail. I'm part of a local community wind awareness group, and I'm standing on Wolf Hill in County Laois. This is my back garden. At the end of my back garden, this is I'm standing on Wolf Hill, which is all up here. Further over here is Spink, and then Fossey Mountain far over that way. Most of this land has been signed up. Most of the farmers around here have been signed up for turbines, with each farmer taking 1 to 3 options. My closest neighbour, which is this field right beside me, has options signed. So there's no telling yet. It is all subject to planning, but there's no telling yet as to where those turbines are going. That will be up to planning. But what I do know from the company is that from Element Power, which will be erecting the turbines closest to me, is that they will only have to be 500 metres from my back door. Which is very worrying, because that's like a 60-storey building standing in that field, overlooking my house. there are other fields and other slopes. Most of these fields will have, subject to planning of course, there could be potentially 7 turbines of 185 metres. That is the spire on top of Liberty Hall, standing in these fields closest to my home. I'm standing in a different part of my garden now, and to the right of me is a land that has 3 options for 3 185 metre turbines planned, proposed for it, all subject to planning again. Up further beyond that is Quilcha land, and Quilcha have proposed that forestry for turbines for the domestic market, again at 185 metres tall, or thereabouts. There's a little variation in those heights. Basically, what I will look out on, if they go ahead, will be one great big wind farm, and I suspect the noise from that will be pretty loud, given that they will be very close to my home. So these companies are very divisive in the way that they have come in and signed up neighbours a year ago, 2 years ago. It was all done very secretively. My own neighbour, my closest neighbour, who owns this field, has been in my kitchen having a cup of tea just recently. He did ask on the threshold, was he welcome? He will always be welcome in my kitchen. I don't agree with what he's doing. I did tell him that we would fight it all the way, but it would never become a personal argument. But the community has been divided. You know, there are people feeling very sore against their neighbour for signing up their land, and which will absolutely impinge on us all.
The engagement with the local community was just the engagement with the farmers to get the leases signed up. So the wind company started probably sometime around maybe early 2012, we don't know exactly. And they approached farmers to get lease options signed up. And then after that, when they had secured a good few, you know, maybe 1,000 or 1,200 farmers signed up over the Midlands, they then started what they called a consultation process. Now, consultation, and especially when it's described under the Aarhus Convention, means participation. So it means talking to people at the scoping stage when all options are opened. But when you've signed up 1,200 farmers or 2,000 farmers, as are now signed in an area, you couldn't say that all options are still opened. When you have detailed the turbine you're going to use, when you have a contract signed with the UK government to supply electricity, that's not consultation. That's coming and telling communities, this is what we're doing. There's a box we have to tick to say that we've consulted. So we are now ticking that box, and we're going to hold public meetings. And at those public meetings, we're going to tell you what we're doing, and we're going to give you our side of the story. We're going to give you the facts about the jobs, we're going to give you our version of the number of jobs we're going to create. So it's not consultation. There has been no real proper consultation.
You know, I think one of the problems that's emerging now is that people are feeling shafted by the big corporate businesses that are coming in to milk us dry. It's all in the name of green energy, and really it's greed energy. With all the turbine power to date, we're not saving CO2 emissions in this country. Our CO2 emissions haven't gone down in any dramatic way, and not one power station has been turned down because of any wind turbine or wind farm. Not one coal plant or gas plant has been turned off.
So in actual fact, there's no benefit at all.
Well, there is benefit to communities who are prepared to accept a little bit of money.
Oh, that's
The
probably.
GAA, the ICA, local schools might get a new roof out of them. The councils stand to gain a few bob here and there. But at what expense? At the expense of our landscape, and at the expense of the Irish people, because we're being shafted. And if it was to go ahead, our kids will never know this countryside without an industrialisation of its landscape.
Trees take away CO2. Well, they do. And they're cutting those down to put up turbines. How much concrete does it take to put one of those up? 185 metres in height. Oh God, it pisses me off to think about it. It does. It does. It just makes me so angry.
So there is an issue with the politics of this. Obviously, there's huge tie-ups between the industry and government. So you have all these linkages. Obviously, we have Brendan Halligan, who is the head of SEAI, who is an ex-chairperson of the Labour Party, so very closely linked with the Labour Party, is also a shareholder and a director with Mainstream Renewables, who are one of the biggest wind companies trying to develop in the Midlands. So those kind of linkages really impact on the credibility of the SEAI, and it makes people cynical about politics. Minister Rabbitte has come out and he has driven this project from the start with no cost-benefit analysis, no strategic environmental assessment. He's currently trying to fit a strategic environmental assessment retrofitted around a plan that was conceived 2 years ago. And it's very hard not to be, a bit taken aback at the way they're approaching this plan. There's a serious lack of leadership. Nobody wants to look at the fact that wind energy is ineffective. Politicians don't like going there because they don't see votes in it. The county councils are all incentivised to give permissions because the planning fee, the fees they will get, the annual rates fees they will get per turbine are enormous. Donegal County Council, currently 50% of their rates comes from wind farms. So, there's a conflict there, that the body who are responsible for appropriate planning are the same body who will receive the most money should a wind farm go ahead. The Strategic Infrastructure Development Act is being applied to these wind farms. Once they're over about 50 megawatts, they go straight to Borpanola and avoid local planning. So very hard not to be, when you see the impact that industry is having on government. And Stephen Donnelly said something on radio last year, which I thought was very interesting. He said, what happens when big business gets too close to government? Bad things happen. And bad things are happening here now in Ireland, right now. And bad things happened here during the boom period, when big business, banks, got too close to government, when regulation was slack. Well, we've got the same mixture here now. We've got poor regulation, big business too close to government. We've got large finance looking for a home and a return. We've got subsidies being chased by big wind developers. And we have an exact recipe that will create another potential bubble that we may end up paying for, us people in Ireland may end up paying for, in the form of expensive electricity and whatever other fallout could ensue in the future.
They don't ask you about it. And then there they are suddenly one day. And you say, well, what's that then? Oh, it's a turbine. Pat Rabbitte said it's okay to put it there. Why? Well, England wants some electricity. Really? Are you kidding me?